what African leaders say to me is, I'm sorry, but we cannot exist as a consequence of a ping-pong in the West. And all this committee knows, that very sadly, and I do find it sad, because it's not my political position, equality issues at this time in our own democracies are contested. At this time there will be people in our House of Commons or in the US chamber or in the Netherlands or other places who do not like, they would describe as woke, some of the decisions around rights. Hang on a minute, let me finish.
Never heard a woman politician say that.
No.
So are you saying women politicians are saying don't prioritise women and girls?
Well,
so what are you saying?
Can I urge the chair just to let me finish the point?
Well, yes, but...
Let me finish the point. All right, let's step back. I think the chair recognises that on the whole, the Republican Party, when in office, step back from commitments to reproductive health rights.
100%.
You accept that. I think you would accept also that we have elected parties who have in this country a position on rights where they would describe identity politics and they would withdraw from areas around girls, they would withdraw from areas around race. They don't accept that way of looking at it. And the point is that leaders in the global south see this and we say we don't want to be at the mercy of aid decisions that are politically motivated in the West. What we want is sustainable funding for girls that survives your political debates. That's what they say to me.
So what do you say to that smallholder woman farmer in Syria when you say we're not ring-fencing money for her?
No, I say it's for us to mainstream and to integrate that work so it is not at the mercy of who happens to win an election in the global north.
So why
that is what I say.
So why is the UK not ring-fencing money for women and girls? Why is it mainstreaming it? So mainstreaming education, for example, if you are a girl who has been sold as a child bride, if you've had FGM so you can't attend school, why are we not prioritising girls' rights so that they can go to that school? Because if you just say, well, we've built a school, turn up, that's not going to happen in a lot of places.
Well, can I just push back on that point? The appointment of Baroness Harman and Lord Collins representing the UK at the UN Commission for Status of Women, underlining our commitment to this gender, is not rolling back on women and girls. In January, when I visited the Chad border and I put more money, 20 million additional funding into supporting women and girls, 88% of the refugees, women and girls, is not us rolling back on this agenda. UK funds supporting work in Gaza particularly is not rolling back on this agenda. We had a special representative preventing sexual violence at a conference which Lord Collins led just a few weeks ago, is not rolling back on this agenda. We continue to support this work, but we do have to find ways to integrate the work across all that we do, to make it central and to ensure that we are working with partners, because it's not just the UK's funding. One of the things that I also want to see is better coordination right across the G7 and right across Europe to make sure that women and girls are centred. I hope that's an adequate response.
Thank you.
And thank you for that. I suppose I think a few of us have concerns about the mainstreaming. How will we measure it and see the impact? And you'll probably be aware that a lot of the organisations are saying programmes like What Works Too, which is really focused on tackling violence against women and girls, which obviously is a priority here, are at risk. The WISH funding, which we raised with the Baroness Chapman yesterday, still being looked at on reproductive health. So mainstreaming, yes, is a good thing, but I think there is a concern about the standalone funds. So how will we know in 4 years' time that we have actually delivered for women and girls? How will we measure the mainstreaming that is worth?
There's a couple of things. One, we are committed to an equality impact assessment, and of course, in making the determinations that we have to make over the coming months, we will be looking both in the immediacy, that's 25, 26 to ensure to make sure that women and girls are not unduly affected, and then over the longer term allocation to make that assessment, and Baroness Chapman will lead on that. That's the first thing. The second thing, as I say, is to work with partners to do our very best to support women and girls. We cannot step in, obviously, in relation to the amount of money that's come out of the system with US funding particularly, but I do have to be clear that I do believe it is wrong for the poorest people in the world to be at the mercy of political decisions made in chambers in the West. And that is what African leaders say to me. And therefore, whilst I recognise that your concern is really women's rights and not losing pots of funding, in the current climate, we have also got to use our diplomatic efforts and all of our soft power to ensure that women and girls are centred. And that is what Harriet Harman's pretty articulate about how we work with women in elected positions in the countries in situ to help support other women.
Yeah. And just one final specific question. I can't really talk about women's rights without asking about Afghanistan and what is happening to women and girls there. There is a movement to push for gender apartheid to be recognised as a crime against humanity in the treaty that's being negotiated in the UN. What's the UK doing diplomatically to stand up for women and girls in Afghanistan, and is that something that the UK is looking at supporting?
One of the things that, and I spoke to Harriet Harman about this a few weeks ago, one of the things that we are doing is working with women, elected representatives who are women in Gulf countries particularly, to influence some of the decision making in situ in Afghanistan and to support those women. I was very pleased to go to Afghanistan when I was in opposition as opposition spokesman for foreign affairs. And of course, I still expect us to be delivering a lot of support, both multilaterally and, I suspect, well, actually, because we aren't present, it will largely be through the multilaterals. So I will do everything I can to centre those girls that I met and those women I met who were in the most desperate of positions. I will look at the
Gender apartheid.
At the gender apartheid. I'm not familiar with it, but I will look at it.
I'll ask you a couple of specifics and write to us if you haven't got the data. The previous government set a target of 80% of FCDO programmes would include a focus on gender equality by 2030. Are you keeping to that commitment?
I'll have to write